You know, after 30 some odd years of working with Lucas, Lucas and I were kind of the old guys around the parish, and when we retired, I think we were among the older in terms of years of service, not necessarily in terms of years of age, but in terms of years of service. We served over 30 years with the parish. And I think one thing that stood out to me about Lucas was his passion for public service. Lucas loved public service, and he loved it in such a way that he took it so seriously that one time I made mention to him, somebody was complaining about the population of mosquitoes in the parish, and I just said, well, you know, they were saying, well, I don't know why mosquito control is not doing a better job, blah, 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 you know, why are we paying that money for that? And my response was, hey, just imagine what it would be like if we didn't have mosquito control. And Lucas did not like that at all. He took that to heart. He says, Mark, that's not the right answer. He says, that's not enough. He said, we need to explain to them what causes those different outbreaks and what happens, and explain to them how we're spraying and this, that, and the other. It's not enough just to say, well, imagine what it would be like if we didn't have mosquito control. He took that so seriously. And I always thought that was that stuck out in my mind about Lucas and the way that his passion for what he did and serving the public was so in depth.
One thing about Lucas was that I always remember, he always was very fiscally responsible with the LMCA and of course also with his district. He was very keen into operational mosquito control, and anything purchases was always cost effective for him. Same thing with the LMCA, which was really good because this was taxpayer dollar and it's LMCA money. And I remember that we would call each other almost every week, you know, just to find out what he's doing, what we're doing here at St. Tammany, and we'd exchange information. We would learn from each other. He would pass on any ideas he had about the current situation. I would do the same. And also any new methodologies that we're doing. And so it was a good work relationship that we had, and you know, we enjoyed our little weekly chats. Early on in mosquito control, there was no 8D and 8A certification, and I know Lucas was very instrumental. He was out in the front, worked with the Department of Agriculture, John Empson, Dr. John Empson. We had meetings with Dr. John Empson to establish certification, 8A and 8D certification. Also, you know, the testing requirements and the protocols and so forth. So this was done probably in the late 70s and early 80s. And also early on, we decided, you know, Lucas was involved with this, very heavily involved with working with Dr. Lamar Meek to establish a cooperative agreement called, at that time was called the LMCA Research Committee research project with Lamar, because at that time, none of us had really the fiscal capability of hiring PhDs, and so we wanted to do some operational research that would benefit everybody across the state. And so we worked out a system where each district would contribute a certain amount of money, and it would go to Lamar, and Lamar would do the operational research in his lab or out in the field. And that's how that got started, and it's still ongoing.
Dad was very knowledgeable in his work. He definitely taught us a lot about mosquitoes, probably a little bit more than a child would need to know, but it was great having him there. His work schedule was awesome, which allowed him to be home with us when we got off school. I remember going to the Christmas luncheons that they had over at Mosquito Control, and they picked us up like we were family also, so it was great. He'd let us look through the microscopes and stuff and look at the larvae and all that. So it was awesome having him over there and learning. And he also taught us good work ethic as well, him being there for, I think, 33 years or so. So it was awesome. He was definitely a great role model to have in that aspect of life.
One of the things that many of the people in attendance today at the meeting will not know is the impact that Lucas had on legislation, not just in Louisiana, but nationwide because of his contacts. He would frequently call me and tell me about a piece of legislation, and we would meet with a legislator and try to work with those issues. And one that still impacts mosquito control in Louisiana today involves some legislation in the late 1980s, early 1990s that would have prevented mosquito control trucks from spraying around schools in the evening. In fact, I think there was something like a quarter of a mile set aside. Somehow Lucas, through all of his contacts, found out about this, called the legislator that was handling the legislation. Lucas convinced him of the problem, and he said he would look into it, and he asked Lucas what would be the best way to deal with it in his opinion, and Lucas said, just write something in there that says mosquito control is exempted. That's the way the legislation was introduced into committee. It exempted mosquito control from this provision. It went through the legislature, not without some debate, but Lucas was able to deal with that. Following Hurricane Katrina, the lab, the state lab was destroyed in New Orleans, and there wasn't a facility to handle the virus activity, the blood work. And so Chuck and Lucas and I worked on that to get the money into the budget, separate money into the budget to provide for arbovirus testing. And again, Lucas took a lead in this because of his relationship with the person who headed up the Appropriations Committee, Vic Stelly. Vic Stelly and one other individual had a great deal to say about that. And because of Lucas's contacts and hard work and some contacts that Chuck had and some that Ed Bordas had, we were able to get the money into the budget for the arbovirus testing at LSU, and that continues today. He would go to ball games with his children. He would meet these legislators from North Louisiana and all over the state. And when we would go to the legislature, he wasn't dealing with strangers. He was dealing with people that he had a relationship with, and that's Lucas. You know, he loved people, people loved him. Everybody knew where he stood. He'd listen to your opinion, and if he thought it was wrong, he'd tell you why. But he did it in a way that didn't put people off.
We made a perfect pair for putting on an annual meeting because he would do all the sponsorship. He would go after all the chemical companies and such, and I did all the organization. I made the contacts with the hotels, negotiated the prices, did everything we needed to do to know exactly where we stood and what we were going to spend. And then Lucas and I would, we'd get together and balance the books. And every day during the registration, either he or I, we would count the money, and it was really AMCA and LMCA. We both owe a degree and a whole lot of thanks to Lucas for the work that he did and his dedication to both organizations. And Lucas was completely unselfish. As far as time, effort, ability, I mean, there was not another person in LMCA that I'd rather work with than Lucas.
As I think about Lucas, aside from just his service as Director of Mosquito Control in Calcasieu Parish, he seemed to me, and maybe this is an oversimplification, but it seemed to me that he had three main passions in his life. The first was as a husband and a father. He took those roles very seriously. And anybody that knew Lucas knew that's what he was about. Second passion was fishing. Oh, he loved to fish and could always tell you, if you were close enough to him, he could tell you where the fish was biting. If you weren't close enough to him, he wouldn't tell you the truth about that. He told me one time that, you talk too much about where the fish are biting, and the next time you go to, it looks like the United States Navy that are located there because of all the folks that spread the word about where the fish were biting. And the third thing was killing mosquitoes.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first time I heard the word. First time I heard Lucas's name. Naturally, I was a green hand at mosquito control in Vermilion Parish, and I knew very little about mosquito control. And one day I walked into Sam's office and he was on the phone, and I could hear part of the conversation. I could hear his part of the conversation. And it was concerning the prospect of a new position in mosquito control for this guy. And Sam encouraged him. He says, you can do it. He says, you've had enough experience. He says, I know you can do it. He says, take a chance, do it. And so when he hung up, I said, we started talking, and I said, Sam, who were you talking to? Who was this person? He says, well, it was this guy in Calcasieu Parish who was being interviewed, or who was being offered the director's position because Bruce Craven was leaving. And I said, what was his name? He said, Lucas Terracina. And I said to myself, Terracina? I said, it's not Broussard, it's not Hebert, it's not LeBlanc. He must live far away. Little did I know Lucas lived in Opelousas. So that was the first time I had ever heard Lucas's name. And that was just before he took over the position of director at, in Calcasieu Parish.
You know, he was a very professional man, but yet he loved to have fun. And the thing I remember more than anything is our dancing adventures, because Louisiana Mosquito Control, I always said we love to work hard, but we love to play hard. And Lucas was a fantastic dancer. So every trip I knew we were going to be dancing.
We became really good dear friends, and the first story I guess I have to tell is we were running buddies at nighttime, and we did like to go out a lot. And he had a T-shirt. He had a white T-shirt, and he, being Italian, it had a big set of red lips on it. Now it said something that I couldn't read the Italian part, but the word said "Kiss me, baby." And if those of y'all knew him back in the day, he had a fro, and you've seen this picture. So of course I always called him Lionel Richie. Every time we walked into a place, he was just like a chick magnet with that big red set of lips. And so I never could find one, and it probably wouldn't have worked for me anyway. But we had a good time when he'd wear that T-shirt.
Well, Lucas and I started mosquito control about the same time in the early 1976 over at Calcasieu Parish Mosquito Control. He was hired as the encephalitis surveillance specialist, and I was the entomologist, and so we had the opportunity to work together and really to establish a good friendship. We socialized together. We used to like duck hunt, and one of the advantages of working out in the field like that is we got to know a few of the rice farmers, and so they allowed us during duck season to go into their fallow fields and hunt. And along those lines, a funny story, a couple of weeks before the season started, Lucas and I, things were kind of slow at that time. So Lucas and I were in the lab. It was a Chappie, Dr. Chapman gave us a room to work in for our lab. And we were in there, and Lucas had brought in about a half a sack of almost rotten sweet potatoes. And so we started cutting them up, and we were going to use them to attract the ducks. And right about in the middle of this, all of a sudden, Johnny Bilodeau walks in. He was the assistant director, our boss. And Lucas and I looked at each other and said, oh no, you know, we're in trouble. And so Johnny says, what in the heck are y'all doing? And Lucas told him, well, what does it look like we're doing? We're cutting up these sweet potatoes for the ducks. And Johnny said, well, push over, let me help y'all. And so we were certainly relieved and didn't expect that response from Johnny.
We had one fishing trip that I really liked. When we were in Chambers County, I took him out on my boat, and we were in the bay fishing. And we were in a real hot spot, catching fish almost as quick as we threw the line in. And at one point, the radio went off from work. And so I picked it up to answer it, and I'm trying to reel a fish in, and Lucas says, you're not going to answer that thing. I mean, he was as serious about his fishing as he was about everything else he did.
We had an assistant director. His name was Scott. I cannot remember his last name now after 40 years, but he was a very large. He was a large man and a young guy. He got married while he was working in mosquito control, and so while on his honeymoon, Lucas got to the lab, and he must have gotten 1,000,000 bad, hungry, bloodthirsty mosquitoes. So when Scott got back from his honeymoon, he and his new wife, they went back to the bedroom to go to bed, and they didn't turn on the lights. They just walked on in, and as soon as they went to bed, they started feeling mosquitoes. Well, they turned on the lamp, and that's when they found the whole ceiling was solid mosquitoes. And needless to say, he wasn't happy with us the next day, and we were kind of nervous about it, but there wasn't any bodily harm done, and we were very happy about that.
It's probably one of my favorite. Is we were in Seattle and we wanted to go get some Dungeness crabs. We all love Louisiana crabs, so we're going to go get Dungeness crabs. So Lucas is the first one up, and they say, "Hi, can I help you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll have a half a dozen." And the lady looks at him and she goes, "A half a dozen?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll get more later if I'm still hungry." And she goes, "Have you ever seen a Dungeness crab?" And he goes, "Well, no, but we got crabs at home." So she pulls up this giant crab and she goes, "You think you can eat a half a dozen of those?" And he goes, "Well, no, but I'll take 2. And she's still shaking our head because that was a lot of crab, but he ate them.
We traveled a lot. In tournament ball, you spend a lot of time with those folks. On the weekends, you're in different cities, Southeast Texas, North Louisiana. We've been down to Florida, so a lot of time sitting around the pool at night, we let the girls swim, so you get to really visit with the parents, and that was a lot of fun. I remember as our daughters were approaching high school, we was all sitting around talking. We had girls from the Lake Charles area that were going to about 4 or 5 different high schools, and the topic that night was the concern about the politics in sports. They was concerned their daughters weren't going to be good enough because they weren't politically correct. And everybody was saying the politics is worse here and it's worse there, and I believe it was Luke that said, he said, "I can tell y'all where the politics is the worst." He said, "I can assure you I know where that's at." And we all just stopped and looked and said, "Well, where's that?" He said, "Wherever your daughter's going to school." He said, "It's going to affect you, so you think it's the worst." And that was pretty much the end of the conversation because he hit the nail on the head.
Lucas's family was heavily involved in sports, and I had the pleasure of, my daughter played softball with one of his daughters, Claire, and she was an outstanding softball player too. And so we finally got to travel on a tournament team that he coached for I don't know how many years, but he was a great coach, a great mentor, a great dad. So, one of our favorite stories of McNeese was Claire was a left-handed. She was a slapper, but she could slap. She could bunt or she could power slap too. And he'd always be sitting up there, just like a little bandy rooster mouth, just she didn't do this, she didn't do that, she got to do this, she got to do that.
He's up in the stands, I'm at the plate, and he's up in the stands. Of course, I probably took strike 1 or something. And he's up there getting on me for doing that. And
there she is, she gets down there, so right when he's really turning on the complaining, his coaching up there, she hits it over the fence for a home run.
All the guys in the stands, all the daddies are like, "You see, just leave her alone. She's fine, she's fine."
So everybody just dogged him, and I think everybody remembers more of that story about him doing his coaching when Claire puts the message, "I can do this," and he did teach her well, and she was outstanding.
That's the kind of person my dad was. He always wanted the best for us, and he always wanted to push us to our abilities that we could be.
Lucas was a friend of friends. He was a great friend. And I heard one time the difference between a good friend and a great friend is that a good friend will help you move a sofa. A great friend will help you move a body. And I think Lucas was one of those kind of friends. And I treasure the memories of being able to be a friend with Lucas, and I miss him dearly. He left us way too early.
Well, what I'll always remember about Lucas above everything is, he was a person of high character, trustworthy, high integrity, and Lucas's word was everything. When he said something, he meant it, and he did, and he backed it up. He was just a good guy, a practicing Christian, a good family man, and a good friend.
Lucas was a good friend. if you needed something, he called him, he was there. It didn't matter what it was, day or night, he was gonna be there for you if he could. And if he couldn't, he'd make it happen. You know, that's just the kind of guy he was, and just a great person. I think we're all a little bit better for knowing him. I really believe that.
He was a great personal friend, a great colleague, and between Lucas and Chuck, we accomplished some significant things for mosquito control legislatively over the years, and it was because of their strengths of relationships.
I'll always remember and appreciate Lucas. You know, I would say he was my closest confidant when it came to managing meetings. If I had a cohort in mosquito control, it was Lucas.
He never, ever gave up. He always was very prayerful, very spiritual, and was accepting of everything that God had in store for him.
Those kind of guys come along very seldom. He was just a blessing to everybody, and I miss him.